So Williams have set up an advanced engineering division that commercializes the know-how and knowledge that we have in Formula One, and we're doing pretty well with that. Sensors, we've built our first kind of IoT device that's gone into fridges in supermarkets, that's helping with the airflow to keep the cold air inside a fridge. Last season we did our first human biometrics project with some of the pit crew, and we started to use that information to help us to make the pit stops even better. So we see opportunities to either make our Formula One team quicker with some of these digital platforms, or that we can commercialize what we do. I saw the model where you open it up much more. It'll be interesting to see whether the guys back at base are interested in that. They like that one where we're between the providers and the customers. But we'll see, because I think we do have to change, and we have to watch what our competitors are doing outside of Formula One, what they're doing with that kind of technology. But for us, the data is where the value is, like it is for most people. The sensors and things are so cheap now, we can put them anywhere. We're getting to that point. Some of the humans are going to be the interesting ones, that human data and what we do with it. When it's medical, most of us are happy to say to our medical professional, yes, you can have my data. But when it's your employer, that's a much more interesting challenge for us. But for the performance of the car, we're seeing it in, we're quite close to a rugby stadium. Rugby's been doing it for a long time. The players capture all of their data, even outside of the game, what they eat, their exercise, everything that they do. And that helps to make them better players. And they got that really early on when they switched from amateur to professional. Formula One's going to be a little more tricky, I think.
Well, yeah, so it's, at one level it's sort of, I guess, it's displacing spend from current places and reallocating it. But also it's new types of services as well. So if you can suddenly, if technically now, today, I can swallow a pill, the pill communicates with a patch on my arm, and the patch then communicates to an application that monitors my health in real time. So technically I can do that today. Now, with that information, what services could be created to support my wellness? So that's sort of net new services that I might not have before, or the government might pay to provide to me, or the government might reduce my taxes if I agree to have that, to take that device as well. So it's not all net new, and it's not all displacing money from other things, but it's I suppose what we're trying to say is there's a new market that innovative people can play into by providing services. They're either B2C, consumer services, or business services. So in manufacturing, if you've got a whole factory connected by sensors, and then robots managing them, there's all kinds of things you can do. You're already starting to see autonomous trucks around Singapore. So the goods loaded off the ships onto a truck, no one driving them, and the truck goes around and delivers it somewhere else, or without any. Now there's job losses there, but there's service opportunity there as well. So it's a combination, I'd say.
I think that the first thing, before we start thinking about the technology, is we're in this phase of helping people understand what are the use cases. Where does this type of a new business model fit? So we know lots of examples in the Formula One world where you use telematics to inform the decisions that are made in that silo, and it's kept in there. And I think when we think of the whole digital platform world, it's now looking at the capabilities and products that companies have and how they can be bundled with other complementary products and services to deliver something that will in the future just become the way it is, expected as normal, let's say. So it's really trying to work with people firstly to understand what those use cases are. I mean, the areas that we would see that are emerging and becoming prevalent are health. Well, we know that in the health side, Apple have placed a big bet here. You can see the new apps that appear on your phone every time you get a new OS, right? The two that Apple have picked are health and home. So I don't like this term of own the home. It kind of implies somebody's doing it to you, but it's about your health and your household. And your household wraps up all of the things around utilities, telco services, etc. Everything you need to run your home more efficiently. And I do think that it's a matter of time before, from a health perspective, that you expect that your phone or your device will be your primary care point of entry. So there will be telematics available on you that will be available to data processing systems whereby you can then go to a primary healthcare provider and buy a service from them to monitor your health. And depending on, and this is the same as what you do in the Formula One world, right? But it's with machines rather than people, and there's not that much difference in terms of the mechanics once we understand it. So on the health side, I think that's something that would happen. And then in the home side of things, we can see that there's lots of home automation, home security. They're still a bit clunky at the moment. I don't think anybody has really nailed that to come up with a nice and easy way for the consumers to do it. And it is about bundling the right services together to deliver a customer experience that makes sense. The best example I see of this at the moment is in the way that Google Maps work, where when you open a Google map to tell you how to get from point A to point B, there's all different colors on the map, and the red ones are the one where the traffic is. And they know that because of big data, where every device that has Google Maps on it, and some that even don't, send data up into the cloud. They process that in real time to give you a route based on the actual movement of people's devices in your area and even further afield as you scroll around the maps. And we just expect that to work now, that it's going to take you 17 minutes on this route or 21 on this. And that's a smart use of big data. So that's probably a long-winded way to say technology is not what this is about first. It's about understanding real use cases that customer experience it'll make such a difference to the way that people interact. They'll expect that that's the way it should always have been because it just makes sense.
I'm not sure we could have taken a different path, and I think that's inherently because of the fact that you come from a legacy organisation with a huge amount of IT and a certain way of thinking. I'd like to say, yeah, we would have changed all that, and you know, maybe we could have tweaked what we've done. So to Barry's point, actually being a little bit more focused around being able to describe, say, this is what we actually want to fundamentally achieve. Let's take a lean startup method and do it. But I think that the challenge that most organisations will find is you sometimes have to go through that loop a couple of times to realise where you are and your space, because you don't. As big organisations with big existing processes and established cultures, it's really hard if you're inside the organisation, as I was, to actually sort of spot what you need to change, because you can't see the wood for the trees in terms of that analogy. Sometimes it's easier, and maybe that would be a natural to get somebody in. So actually, we've got a very strong relationship with BearingPoint, because there's a natural synergy between an organisation that's got a very clever piece of enabling software and another organisation that has got the ability to host and deliver a platform on a global basis. So you collaborate at that level to produce something that actually helps us both and helps other customers in the process. Get the advice early from independent views would be good. I mean, I've had the privilege of being able to work with with these guys and talk with Jeff Parker and people like that. When you start to see all of the many examples and you get behind, this doesn't all happen overnight. Airbnb is 8 years in its creation as one of the largest hoteliers in the world without miraculously owning one piece of real estate. But you kind of have to delve into the detail, and that I'd probably say one piece of advice is get the advice. Do your own research. I mean, there's tons on the web as well as lots of clever people that you can tap into. Thank you.
May I just maybe add a little bit to that and a perspective? I was at an event in December, a CIO symposium, and the big topic that was for discussion was around bimodal IT. The fancy way of basically saying you need two ways of doing things, and this plays directly into what we're talking about, because every person here is involved in a business, and you have a current line of business with revenue streams and processes, and that needs to continue. But what we see is that the companies who are making progress in the digital economy have created a new way of working, independent of the shackles of the existing we call it legacy or as-is world, and that new way of working doesn't have to comply with all of the same processes and rules and regulations, and it enables it to do things in a lean startup way. How these are structured, some companies put them into separate boxes and give them a funding amount, for example, and say, can you help us to identify where revenue streams are going to come from within 3 to 5 years, because what you're doing today is going to decline. And that's definitely prevalent in the telco world. In the utilities world, it's going to be about combining the traditional utility services with other things to be more customer-centric. So that approach of bimodal IT allows the existing business to continue and keep the P&L running as is, with the new ways of working to identify new opportunities, sometimes come under the innovation banner.
So clearly there is the huge opportunity, and then there is the threat of that, and that's, I think everybody now recognises the enormous threat of cyber security. You know, if hackers can put an idiot into being the most powerful man in the world, then what else could they do? So, you know, we have to worry about that. But certainly in terms of just the basic business models for everyday businesses, you know, all those companies, Amazon, Apple, Google, you know, they have grown very fast by sorting out basic security in terms of payment security and so on and so forth. So there's a big macro issue there, just as the big macro issue on personal data and privacy, that needs some governance and direction from organisations like the World Economic Forum. And security has to be baked in ultimately to any IoT system, of course, and it is a big challenge. But there's nothing to stop, you know, that and privacy and other things, nothing to stop any company from embarking on this approach to rejuvenating the business model. But it's just one of the big things that we have to keep in our mind, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of the last 3 years focusing on risk and trying to get that balance right. In the past, I think there was far too much clamping down on innovation by saying that's too risky, we could lose our data, and actually data was being lost in other easier ways, right? Snowden walked out the door with all of that, and how much did they spend on trying to secure their data? So we focused really on understanding your data and how long it's valuable for. So some F1 data is only valuable for 3 years. So why would you apply the same policies and procedures and technology to securing it after it's no longer valuable? And a lot of CIOs I talked to, and certainly my experience within Williams was all data was treated equally when it's not. Not all data is equal. And we use, IT professionals often use risk as a way of gaining control and trying to keep control. And I think that's completely the wrong way to go about things. And there are some big risks, you know, especially in the IoT and in the sensor space and that data and where it is, and there are no standards. So everyone's working their own way. And so for most companies, you have to map up your own attitude and your approach to risk, and how much risk are you willing to take. And are you going to be an early adopter or not? We want to be an early adopter at Williams because the only way we think that we're going to beat Mercedes and Ferrari and the others is by accessing new technology, new ways of working before they do, because we can't outspend them. So we'll take a bit more risk. Maybe then, Williams were always known as quite a conservative team in the past. I think that's changed, the new management, and they brought me in to come and drive some of that. It can be frustrating when I'm dealing with someone who's been there for 25, 30 years, who's, no, this is how we've done it, this is how we've always done it. What I like to remind them is that, you know, I won a world championship more recently than they have, so question everything. But I think in terms of being an early adopter, and some of the solutions that we're providing internally into the team, and not always built with security in mind. So we sometimes take a risk knowing that we may trust and verify, we may lose something here, but understanding what's important, how long it's important for, protecting the things that really need to be protected and have to stay on your site and can never go into a cloud. A lot of the banking CIOs I talk to now, that they were always told by their audit, you can't put anything in the cloud. But actually, once they started diving into looking at the data, there is some data that they can put in the cloud. Some systems they can put in the cloud. But specifically with IoT, I'm concerned around the lack of standards, and we're all just out there doing our own thing. And I think that can be risky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of one of those. I'd love to say it was designed with the outset of doing that, but it wasn't. It was designed with the selfish gains of how do we change our own organisation. But yeah, one of the things that we are a telco and an IT company. Therefore, that's our bread and butter. We talk to many organisations. In fact, I've talked to a number of banks who've probably got in some cases more IT than we have. But they're a banking organisation, and I think as part of the the change in the way that organisations are looking at it and saying, well, hence the question, what do you want to be known for? Is like, actually, do you want to be a finance organisation? Do you want to be a pharmaceutical? Or do you want to build platforms and be big IT companies as well? And I think the general thrust, and I guess it's very much within, you're more within Williams, you're concerned about how do you get the driver in the car to work at 100% efficiency to win the next race. That's your core business. And you do have to do some IT, but you'd probably rather do less of that and more of the car. And I think, so absolutely, the platform we've got, it can be used in exactly that in that way, and we are doing it. So the European Commission is a great example. MK Smart was that goes out of his innovation phase into commercial sense would work, and some great opportunities that we're working with BearingPoint on in terms of their own customers that want to not take on-premise software solutions, but they would rather take a pre-built managed environment. Why build it yourself? It's a complex lot of IT. Is it what you want to do or not?
I think there's a good analogy with Formula One, which other sports have started to do, and I think a lot of the CIOs I talk to in other businesses, they find what makes the car quicker, and we've seen it in rowing, what makes the boat quicker, and the bicycle quicker in something that's to do with drugs, but anyway, forget that. Do we want to spend money? If we're taking money away from the car, because we want to, within IT, we want IT projects, and we want to still mount boxes into server racks, that we're taking money away from what's actually important. What's going to make the car quicker? And in our meetings and when we're talking about projects, and we're currently planning the 2017 roadmap beyond Q1, and we ask that question, will this project make the car quicker? No, we're not doing it. Yeah, absolutely. Partnerships are so important to us. We have 20 people in IT. Some of those are traveling with the race team. Maybe the size of company we are, but most of the Formula One teams, even the ones with lots of money, they spend all that money on experimentation in aerodynamics or trying new materials for the car. It's not spent on things like IT. So a very small team, supplemented by some critical partnerships, like the one we have with BT. We built a secure network where we can take on a new customer and build a secure network for them with all of the infrastructure they need, the storage, the systems, in a day. That used to be multiple weeks. We couldn't do it ourselves. Yeah. So the partnerships are critical.
The example I gave of in America, the network of electricity cooperatives creating a big marketplace of 42 million people. Of course, their core focus is to provide innovative services to people who live in rural America, which are underserved because the big companies can't be bothered to try and reach them. So again, rather than creating their infrastructure themselves, they have looked for who can provide that infrastructure. Now, BT in the past could have said, well, we'll give you some base IT infrastructure, and then you work out what to put on top of that. So then they would have to work out what other components they need. But in this case now, because BT's built not only the secure cloud platform, but also the ecosystem enablement capability, they're able to sell both of that to that network. So suddenly, once that takes off, there's great business for you, but you've offered something that's distinct and different to what Amazon Web Services even, or other IT companies could offer that organization. So in many ways, you've leapfrogged the digital native here, which is Amazon Web Services, by creating a more valuable infrastructure, which isn't just compute, but it's the capability to manage a marketplace and platform. You saw the stats I showed there. There's not much growth in the world at the moment because we're operating in a certain type of business model. The people who are growing are the digital companies because they really do understand software and how to leverage the connectedness of everything. And they understand about data analytics. So if we're happy to have that level of growth, then fine, we can continue with that. If we want to do something more exciting, then we have to take on board those principles I mentioned from Steve Jobs and Einstein, and then the last one from Jeff Immelt. We have to become software and analytics companies, and the business model that works in software and analytics is the one I've described here, the platform business model, creating an ecosystem around you. So I don't think there's no alternative unless you're happy with low or slow growth. The big opportunity, though, is to affect GDP, because those pressures that I mentioned, the macro pressures on productivity based on demographics and based on changing competitive environments, where you'll have cities in China individual cities in China having larger GDP than the whole of Sweden in a few years' time. Massive shifts in economic activity and strength. Then we have to adopt a different way of working and a different business model, not only for organisations, but also for the country. And when I was back here in December, we had a very interesting meeting with the HSE, the health executive here. And they said, look, we're creating an ecosystem. We have an ecosystem already, but it's a people ecosystem. We've got lots of different organisations who've agreed to work together to improve the wellness of Ireland and to improve health outcomes in Ireland. So we've created the ecosystem. What we don't yet have is I guess, a technical platform or a digital platform to automate the interactions and the flow of money between all the parties. We don't have the infrastructure in place to enable people to bundle up services, create new applications, etc., and do it in a secure way that operates with the principle that I've just mentioned. So I think fundamentally, it's, as I said, we've done some calculations on the impact on GDP growth. This is a government topic. That then falls back, or then, I guess, affects regulation, because why are banks constrained from serving their customers in the way they are today? Why are telcos only allowed to do certain things but can't do others? It should be about stimulating socio-economic growth. You saw the example from America, the rural community, rejuvenating it with a platform and a smart grid connected together. I think that's the golden opportunity for everybody, to think differently and apply software and analytics, but do it with the business model I've described. And it can be adapted and adopted to every situation. So the world is wide open, blue sky opportunity for those who want to try and grab hold of it.
So we're having big rule changes this year around aerodynamics. The cars will look very different. In fact, they'll probably look a lot like the cars from the 80s. So we're kind of going back to that. So we'll have regulations that'll change, and that will affect it. But I think data analytics and getting to the data in real time, making the right decision at the right time, is going to be a big part of where we're going to go in the next couple of years. You were talking about smart cities today. For me, smart factories is really interesting. How we do a much better job of connecting design and manufacturing, and then feeding that information to race engineering and coming back and getting that iteration much quicker than it is right now, where we might take 3 or 4 races to get something on the car. I think we might see 3-4 years 3D printers at the track. So instead of what we have to do now, where a designer has to come up with a concept, he knows that he's got to send it out by the Friday before the race, 7 or 8 days before at the moment, it has to be signed off, manufactured over that weekend, which is going to cost you a lot of money. And so they're constrained. If they could keep designing up until the Thursday night of a race weekend, or learn things on the Friday, sometimes by looking at our competitors and seeing what they've done on their car, sometimes by what we learn from our own car, and then making decisions and printing overnight, so that when the mechanics get to the track the next morning, and when we've got time zone differences, you could almost end up with an 18-hour window to print something at the track, they fit it on the car, and it goes running on the Saturday morning. I think we want to shorten that whole life cycle by joining the silos that we saw exist in some companies. We do have that. We're trying to break that down, and we think technology has a big part to play. Education of humans is going to be important too, but technology will, and these kind of digital platforms, we think is the only way we'll get to that point where you can go through all the decision making and approvals and make sure that it's going to comply with the regulations, and print it out and stick it on the car and make the car quicker.
I think never say never, but I agree. Yeah, you're not going to take an organisation with decades of culture. Yeah, it just doesn't change overnight. But the critical aspect is learning how to embrace both. The bimodal IT, we talked about the Ninja IT, the lean startup. If you look at my day job, I'm a product manager. I manage change, and what you need is essentially the activist within the organisation to lead that charge. And that's easy to do in the IT space, because it's the bookseller disrupting our business. It's it's kind of the random craziness of those situations. and just spot it and nurture it. I think that's the biggest thing. The question earlier was like, kind of, what would you do different? I think it's just learning and talking to people that have got some experience, so you can just spot those things faster, so you can create those edge. Constantly looking, learning. We've got the tools and the systems. Everything's becoming more connected. All of that information gets to you faster. You just got to embrace it rather than fear it, and then use it to your own good.
Step one is picking up what John said. It's about understanding how you can think about your business now and what are the things that your products and services can be bundled with in order for it to deliver the next winning application, the next winning service for customers. So in the customer-centric view of the world, it's about looking at what you do today and how that can be bundled with things that haven't been done before, or that haven't been done before efficiently enough so that the customer interaction is seamless. So it's really about having those discussions to understand what are the use cases, what are the concepts, and the clearer you can get that. Getting the technology stuff done, that's just work, once you understand what you want to do. So if you can bring people together who haven't previously had a meaningful discussion about, if we put A with B and C, now that's interesting, and get that out in the market quickly to see if it works. And that's the whole lean startup philosophy. Europe is a little bit behind, definitely the west coast of America on this, and that's where I think we need to push forward that type of thinking. Lean startup DevOps, it's the people that need to come up with the ideas, and then realizing that in technology is just work. That's the platform is there, it's capable. You can do it with APIs, you can plug it together using all the widgets and pieces. But let's try to have discussions to broaden people's thinking away from the silos into complementary products and services to deliver something that people haven't yet conceived. That will just become, that's the way it works.